Hi, everyone. It's your favorite MLB newsbreaker, Bob Nightingale, and you're listening to the Lollygaggers Dynasty Recap. Enjoy the show, and thank God for Jeffrey Springs.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lollygaggers Dynasty Recap. I am your host, Zang. I will be running a solo show this evening as I recap our 9th week of play, just about to come up on double digits. This was a fun one, a lot of good back and forth matchups. A couple interesting, I'll send the screenshot in Discord, but 3 that in terms of who had the lead, they followed the exact same pattern the entire week. So that was kind of fun to keep an eye on once I noticed that happening. And I can't stop thinking after I hear that intro about what Peach mentioned about just the incredulity in Bob Nightingale's voice as he reads, thank God for Jeffrey Springs. And you really can hear it. He didn't read the copy beforehand, and it really does make it so much better. We will get started in our matchup minute with the Arizona Asphalt, who took on the St. Petersburg Tropopologists. St. Pete had the lead after Monday, and their 85 points scored. Ryan Waldschmidt, 14 points, along with Junior Caminero, and his 18 points helped give them that lead. Arizona did have a nice start from their ace, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, with 29 points over there. On Tuesday, however, a 100-plus day would give Arizona the lead. They scored 145, 15 points each from Freddie Freeman and Brandon Nimmo, and 35 from Jacob Mizorowski. St. Pete didn't mind 13 from Brent Rooker over on the other side, but they would slow down quite a bit, both teams would, on Wednesday, as St. Pete scored 57 and Arizona scored 24. That 24 would be enough for them to hold the lead that they had taken on Tuesday. 15 of those 24 points did come from some motherfucker named Randy. On Thursday, St. Pete took the lead back, scoring 92 points to 37 over on Arizona's side. For St. Pete, it came from two pitchers, mostly, I should say. 27 from Cade Cavalli and 35 from Braxton Ashcraft, who has been a welcome surprise in the Tropopologist rotation early on in this season. Most of the points, 37 points, as I said, scored by Arizona. 31 of those came from Eduardo Rodriguez. So mostly a solo effort there for the Asphalt. On Friday, St. Petersburg held that lead, scoring 48 points. Zach Neto had 18, Logan Henderson had 23, and would have been an even larger lead had Tim Hill, not given up 15 points there for the Yankees relief pitcher. Mike Soroka had 23 points over on the other side, and the 11 from Brandon Nimmo, along with the 11 from Freddie Freeman the next day, would help Arizona take that lead back on Saturday. Liam Hicks also had 16 for them, and they would close out the win on Sunday, scoring 90 points to 79 points for St. Petersburg. On that final day, Seth Lugo did have 20 points, along with Yoshinobu Yamamoto racking up another 27. Arizona takes the win from St. Petersburg as they win 509 to 479, 30 points separating the two teams, which was our closest matchup. This was an interesting look at quality over quantity. St. Petersburg led in at-bats, in hits, in runs scored. They also led in innings pitched, in Ks, and in wins. But Arizona led in almost every other category. So although they obviously had fewer innings pitched, fewer guys getting those at-bats in, what they were doing with those, they obviously led in home runs. They allowed fewer earned runs over in Arizona, allowed fewer hits, surrendered fewer walks, had more saves, more quality starts, and, the list goes on and on here. So, look, St. Petersburg has the volume, and overall we know that they can provide that quality, but this week it just wasn't quite there. And for Arizona, it really was. They were lesser in all those categories, but look, they managed to put things together and obviously have a pretty strong week as they racked up that win. Couple standout batters there. Willy Adames with 31 points is a little surprising to see. I know he definitely had a slow start to the season along with the rest of those Giants. And then for a pitcher, Yoshinobu Yamamoto with his 56 points. He was our number 2 potent pitcher. So that helped Arizona on the way to that win. As I mentioned, Braxton Ashcraft has been fantastic for the Tropopologists. One kind of poor start there with 15 points, not terrible, but not great in his last start, but 35 in this past one. Before that, 32 and 35 again. So he is definitely breaking out another 30-point start in his second of the year. So he is doing some pretty impressive stuff. And yet another pitcher joins the Tropopologists monster rotation that, we only know will become stronger once Skubal makes his way back, which it does look like. I think he was throwing a bullpen maybe this past week I saw a clip of. So that is certainly exciting news for the Tropopologists and for KJ, the Tigers fan. Sliding on to our next matchup, we have the Cuyahoga Black Panthers taking on the Arctic Real Survivors. The Arctic took our lead after Monday, scoring 70 to 39 points. Xavier Edwards with 11 points for the Arctic and Jose Ramirez with 17 for Cuyahoga. Arctic held their lead on Tuesday, scoring 74 points. Jesus Luzardo had 19 points and Landon Roop had 22. Over on the other side, Cuyahoga did outscore them on the day with 96 points, 11 from Travis Bazana and 28 from Bryce Miller. On Wednesday, the first 100 plus of the matchup would give Cuyahoga the lead, as their 108 points came in part from Pete Alonso with his 12 and Tanner Bybee with his 25. Cuyahoga held their lead despite only scoring 17 points on Thursday. The Arctic only scored 22, and 10 of them came from Ernie Clement. On Friday, Cuyahoga had a 3-day consecutive lead now as they scored 79 points. Arctic winning their second straight day with 85, but not quite enough to take back the lead. The big news for the Real Survivors there on Friday was the return of Garrett Cole as he put up 25 points, sure to be a boost to that Real Survivors rotation. On Saturday, Cuyahoga did win the day once again and held the lead that they had now established for 4 days, scoring 95 points to 65 over on the other side. Teoscar Hernandez had 19 points for the Black Panthers on Saturday, and George Springer, a recent trade acquisition for the Arctic Real Survivors, scored 10. Both teams would tally up 100-plus point days on Sunday, Cuyahoga with 118 and the Arctic with 111. Framber Valdez had 26 for the Arctic, and Brandon Young, who was traded for that morning, had 28. But unfortunately for the Real Survivors, Rafael Devers' 17 points would end up being the difference in the day. It didn't make up for the matchup, certainly didn't hurt for the Black Panthers to have that 21 from Christian Scott or the 26 from Parker Messick either. We did see Cuyahoga take down the Real Survivors, get a much-needed win as they take the victory, 554 to 510. 44 points separate the two of them, and in a tough roll of the dice for the Arctic Real Survivors, they did score the most points in a loss, obviously with that 510. A great scoreline, but just came up against a tough opponent this week in Cuyahoga. Taking a look at everything, Real Survivors really had it on the hitting side. Outside of home runs, they really led in most of the categories. You saw that Xavier Edwards with his 32. He's been so great early on this year. George Springer, also with 32 this week, has been really great since coming back from that injury. And nice to see, that addition making some waves for the Real Survivors. And on the other side, Cuyahoga kind of did it with the pitching. Tanner Bybee with that 35 that I mentioned. Parker Messick with 40. And Christian Scott, who's done some nice work for the Mets since he came up with that 29. Cuyahoga, as we said, did take this win, and certainly one that they needed. I believe they were on a little bit of a losing streak. This was, one of those fun matchups where Arctic entered the week 4-4, and Cuyahoga entered the week 3 and let's see. Yeah, no. It would be 4 and, oh my gosh, my math is all off here. No, 3 and 5, 3 and 5. Thank you for letting me work through that. It's 10:45 at night. It's a little bit late. So obviously with that win, Cuyahoga does tie them up, and you will hear about their point totals when we get to the standings in a few minutes. The Joinville Friendly Capybaras took on the Southwest Rabid Kansas Coyotes, and after a slow start to the season, Joinville was here to make a statement, and my goodness, did they. Southwest Kansas scored 59 points on the opening day. That statement wouldn't come just yet for Joinville, scoring just 8 on the opening day. For Southwest Kansas, it was a trio of batters who all scored 10 points. Dansby Swanson, Jazz Chisholm, and Michael Bush. That -8 from Trevor Rogers did unfortunately end up being the nail in the coffin. He was a great pickup mid-season last year for Okie Sooner and just has not replicated that performance really outside of those first 3 weeks. So he did end up getting dropped after this start. Kansas would hold their lead through Tuesday, scoring 79 points, but a big 89-point day from Joinville would help inch them ever closer. Ketel Marte and Mike Trout both with 11 there. From this point forward, Joinville would have more days where they scored over 100 than days they scored under 100. 142 on Wednesday gave them the lead that they would not relinquish, but let's talk a little bit about how it happened throughout the week. On Wednesday, as I said, 142 points. Ketel Marte with 17, Michael Waka with 26, and Trey Savage with 37. On Thursday, they would score 40 points with Southwest Kansas, scoring 53, 26 of those from Spencer Strider, who's had a nice little run here. 82 points for Joinville in their final double-digit day of the week, 25 coming from Logan Gilbert. Over on the other side, we did see Southwest Kansas's 100-plus of the week as Bryce Elder put up 23 and Noah Cameron put up 30, helping the Rabid Coyotes score 119 points in total. On Saturday and Sunday, Joinville scored 111 and 139 to cap off one of the highest scoring weeks we have seen in league history. Stephen Kolek with a complete game shutout scored 45 points on Saturday. Don't forget Mike Trout with 10, Ivan Herrera with 13, and Ketel Marte with 14. On Sunday, the cherry was put on top of this impressive cake put together by the Capybaras as Ketel Marte scored another 13, Ryan Nelson with 31, and Reed Detmers with 46. Just an absolutely bombastic performance by the friendly Capybaras as they score 612 points, beating out the Southwest Kansas Rabid Coyotes by 175 points. It was, of course, our biggest blowout of the week and included the highest scorer. Let me know in the discussion channel for the podcast. I'm pretty sure this is our first 600. I could be wrong. There may have been one last year, and I might take some time digging into the league archive after I record. But I am 90% sure this is the first time we've actually seen a team eclipse 600 in a single week, like a 7-day week. You know, obviously we've had those 10-day weeks where people go over, but I'm pretty sure this is our first 7-day 600 point. Obviously, Joinville featured quite a few best batters and potent pitchers. Ketel Marte, with 75 points, was by far the best batter of the week, obviously coming in at number one. Just for a little perspective on how much better he was, Ketel Marte was, as I said, the number one best batter with 75 points. The number two best batter had 47 points. So yeah, just insane stuff. I mean, that 28 full points ahead of the next best guy. Unbelievable week for Ketel. And also two potent pitchers. Number 3 in Reed Detmers with 49 points, and number 4 with Ryan Nelson, who tacked up 48. Not to be put to too much shame. Okie Sooner and the Southwest Kansas Rabid Coyotes did have a best batter as well. Number 5, Casey Schmidt, who put up 40 total points. Moving on to our next matchup, we have the North Pole Natty Bows, who are taking on the Bronx Bandoleros. Bandoleros took the lead early on in the week, obviously on Monday, scoring 83 points and 81 on Tuesday. They held that 2-day lead thanks to some help from Jake Bauer's 15 points and Walbert Ureña's 25 on Monday, and Chase Burns' 34 on Tuesday. However, in one of the highest scoring days we have seen, certainly this season, 204 points were racked up by the Natty Bows on Wednesday. Let me read off the list and how they got there. Merrill Kelly with 20 points, Shane Boz with 26 points, Shohei Ohtani with 32 points, Joe Ryan with 34, and Chris Sale with 37. Of course, some of this comes in the fact that they did have 5 starters going that day, but as I've probably mentioned on the pod before, I write somebody's stat line down if they're a starter and they score over 20 points, and all 5 of those did. So that is how you get to 200 points, folks. 5 starters all putting up more than quality starts there. And that 200 would spread the gap to a point that would just not be overcome. 35 points for the North Pole on Thursday, 34 of them coming from Luis Severino. Don't forget about Michael Harris and his 17 points over on the other side. Byron Buxton had 10 points on Friday for the Natty Bows as they scored 66 points total. 59 scored over on the other side from kind of a hodgepodge of guys. 13 from Jackson Holiday. Nice to see him in his return. 14 from William Contreras and 32 from Yuri Perez. On Saturday, a couple of walkers did the work. 23 from Christian over on the Natty Bow side and 28 from Jordan over on the Bandoleros. And the North Pole would close things out on Sunday. Christian Walker, another 13 points there, and Wilson Contreras with another 10. Over on the other side, the Bronx Bandoleros did get to enjoy that walk-off home run from Aaron Judge, which racked them up 10 points. However, they would end up falling to the Natty Bows 522 to 411, 111 points separating the two of them. North Pole did have one of the best batters for the week, Wilson Contreras, with 43 points. He ranked at number 3 on the best batters list. And this is one where, honestly, North Pole just kind of dominated in all the categories. They led in, the quantity things like at-bats and innings pitched. They led in some of those key stats like Ks, like saves, holds, wins. Interestingly enough, Bronx did allow fewer earned runs, fewer hits, and fewer walks. But on the hitting side, North Pole really made up the difference. 121 total bases to 94 in the Bronx. 25 extra base hits to just 16. 30 walks to just 15. Only 51 strikeouts to 61. And 11 home runs to 10. So obviously, a really impressive week from the Natty Bows. It's interesting. Bows was saying a little bit that his team can be kind of hot and cold. And I definitely agree there. There are some weeks where it's this monster 200 point a day type team that we're seeing, and some weeks where it looks a little bit shakier. So should the Natty Bows make the playoffs, I think it'll be really interesting to see kind of what versions of the team we get. Are we going to see them, come in on a lower seed and maybe take down one of the top teams, or maybe come in as a higher seed and unfortunately have one of those colder weeks and lose to a lower ranked team? It'll be interesting to see. Just something I'm obviously keeping in mind, and since Bo's mentioned it, I thought I'd throw it on here. The Seoul Sovereigns took on the Sault Ste. Marie Locks, and the Sovereigns had the lead to start things off on Monday, scoring 94 points. 57 scored over in Sault Ste. Marie. An interesting day for Seoul. Max Meyer scored 31 points. Nolan Arenado with 13. Christian Yelich with 14. Yandy Diaz with 17. But then a couple tough starting pitching performances. Shota Imanaga with minus 12 and Mackenzie Gore with minus 5. So a bit of a mixed bag there in Seoul. On Tuesday, we saw Sault Ste. Marie's latest trade start to bear fruits as their 58 points included 17 from Jaron Duran. We'd see another 12 from Duran, along with 20 from Mladzinski on Wednesday, although it would not be enough to overtake the lead that Seoul had established on Monday. Juan Soto also had 17 points for the Sovereigns on Wednesday. Casey Mize with 24 on Thursday did help to close the gap just a little bit for Sault Ste. Marie, but the lead established on Monday would be carried through Friday and, yes, through the weekend for our first and only wire-to-wire win this week for the Sovereigns. New trade acquisition Taj Bradley had 23 points for Sault Ste. Marie on Saturday, and Dylan Dingler with his usual 13 on Sunday. Over in Seoul, we did see 66 points scored on Saturday, and the only 100-plus of the matchup, scoring 136 on Sunday. 26 from Mitch Keller and 30 from Mackenzie Gore to close things out there. The Sovereigns, as I said, did win the matchup 500 to 347. 153 points separated the two of them. And we did see the lowest scorer of the week in Sault Ste. Marie with that 347. Seoul featured two best bat potent pitcher, two superlative players, I should say. Juan Soto, number 2 on that best batters list with 47 points. And Max Meyer, number 1 on the potent pitchers list with 70. A couple great starts in a row for him, which has been a really nice boon for the Soul Sovereigns. The Washington State Winners, coming off a tough 3-game losing streak, came into the Valley to take on the Gift Lords, and things certainly started off well for Washington. For the Valley. I'm so sorry. They started off well for the Valley, scoring 127 points on a huge starting pitcher day. Andrew Painter with 22, Slade Ciccone with 28, and JT Ginn with that unfortunately just brutal, almost no-hitter into walk-off home run surrendered. Still tacked up 37 points, but that stings a little bit knowing how much higher it could have been for Al Martinet. Brian Wu had 34 and Sal Stewart had 12 over on the other side. The Valley would hold their lead on Tuesday. Zach Galoff with 13, Ezekiel Duran with 14, Nick Kurtz with 16, James Wood with 17. My goodness, is that offense impressive? And it would score on their second 100 plus of the matchup on Wednesday, 43 of them coming from Kyle Harrison. Over on the other side, we did see the gaps start to get closed a little bit as Washington had a strong 80-point day, 13 from CJ Abrams and 17 from Sal Stewart. On Thursday, the Valley would score just 18 points as the lead got ever closer with Washington scoring 54. This time it was Brandon Lau with 11 and Spencer Miles with 25. On Friday, a explosive day would give Washington State the lead. 1 batter and 3 pitchers to name off here. CJ Abrams with 15, Tomiyuki Sugano with 23, Christopher Sanchez with 36, and Gavin Williams with 46. They held their lead on Saturday as Burleson scored 11 and Zach Wheeler scored 34 and closed things out on Sunday, scoring 66 points, 32 from Foster Griffin and 11 from Julio Rodriguez. We did see Washington break their losing streak as they won 570 to 485, of an 85-point win over the Valley Gift Lords. Both teams did feature members of the superlative lists. Nick Kurtz was number 4 on the best batters list for the Gift Lords. He scored 43 points, and Gavin Williams was number 5 on the potent pitchers list. He scored 46 points for the Washington State Winners, and always fun, I think, when somebody makes it onto a potent pitchers list off of just one start. That was just a one-start week for him, but such a good performance, he made it on the list anyway, so certainly good for him to see there. Taking a look at just some key categories here. Washington State doubled up the Valley's home runs 10-5, and really took them kind of to the house in terms of the pitching. About 5 more innings pitched, about 6 more Ks, 5 more wins, 1 fewer loss, 1 fewer earned run. So just all those categories, they kind of got a chance to win. And I know this is not a Cats league, but, that is kind of a nice little glimpse into things. Foster Griffin is definitely a name to continue keeping an eye on. He's somebody I mentioned a few weeks back as, hey, this guy's starting to kind of break out. Starting at April 21st, he scored 20 points, 26, 21, 36, and had a couple tough weeks, a -8 and a +8, before, again, in this last outing going for 32 points. So definitely somebody to keep an eye on there for the Winners. And boy, I am just never going to be ceased to amaze by the Gift Lords lineup. They've just got so much depth. I mean, James Wood with 32. Of course, I mentioned Kurtz, Ezekiel Duran, who has a really impressive week, 26 points. The one thing to keep an eye on here, Munetaka Murakami, who it does look like is starting to cool off a little bit. Again, everybody was wrong about him. Well, not everybody. Clearly, Sal Martinet took him with the 3rd overall pick. But so many MLB guys were wrong about him. And obviously, he got out to that unbelievable start, but has definitely started to slow down a little bit over the last couple weeks. I'm just reading out Murakami's stat line for this past week. 21 at-bats, 5 hits, 4 singles, a double, no homers, and 9 strikeouts. So, we are starting to see some of that profile. This is the way it is with hitters, though, especially, established guys coming from overseas. They come over, tend to start off pretty strong because they know their stuff. Then the league gets the book out on them a little bit, and they start to regress a little bit. They readjust to the league and go back and forth, and we'll find a way in the middle. And I would still imagine, based on what we've seen, that middle is somewhere in the 30 home run number for Munetaka Murakami. I think he's still going to be really, really good. Our final matchup of the week was the headliner as the 4th place Portland Pioneers took on the 1st place Fenton Melonheads. The Melonheads took the lead on Monday, just 2 points shy of 100 as they scored 98-83 over in Portland. The Melonheads got 14 from Carson Benj, 22 from Shane Drowan, and 38 from Michael King, but a minus 16 from Robbie Ray put a bit of a damper on things. Over on the other side, 17 points for Bo Bichette and 31 from Sonny Gray accounted for a big chunk of the Pioneers' points scored on that day. Another strong day for Bo Bichette on Tuesday as the Pioneers would get another 18 from him along with 14 from Bryce Terang as they would score 112 total, taking the lead from Fenton. Things were kept closer thanks to 12 from J.J. Weatherholt and 21 from Zebby Matthewson. Portland held the lead on Wednesday despite scoring just 45 points. 55 scored over on the Melonhead side, 22 of them coming from Connolly Early. Fenton retook the lead on Thursday, scoring 62 points, just 27 over on the Pioneers side. For the Melonheads, it came from a duo of starting pitchers, along with one batter who has been heating back up, Joey Cantillo with 26 and Jose Soriano with 27, along with Kyle Stowers, who finally looks to be kind of coming back into form with 14 points there. The Pioneers took the lead that they had lost back on Friday, scoring 74 points, 22 from Bubba Chandler and 25 from Peyton Tolley. Spencer Arrighetti joined in the 20 parade over for the Melonhead, scoring 21, but Jacob deGrom with an uncharacteristic minus 10 sunk things just a little bit for them. Let's see. Yes, it was this day. It was Friday where the Pioneers had a .2 point lead over the Melonhead. So a very close game coming into the weekend. Portland did score 45 on Saturday. Fenton scoring 32. So the Pioneers did have the lead going into the final day of the week. And while things went not great for Portland, 2 starters didn't do so well. Rasmussen's 32 was great. Corbin Carroll's 15 was also nice. And you won't say no to 10 points from Kyle Tucker. While things may have not gone great for Portland, they were disastrous for the Melonheads. Unfortunately, a duo of starters in Robbie Ray and Michael King, both of whom were lined up for excellent opponents, just good starts for them to go up against, both tallied minus 1 point as the Melonheads scored just 4 in total on the day and would fall to the Pioneers 473 to 383, 90 points separating the two of them. As you can see, it really came down to that final day. Portland outscored them by 77 points on the final day, and 90 points separated it. So really close. It was the fewest points in a win this week for the Pioneers with their 473. And we now see Portland and Fenton in a tie record-wise. Now, listen, obviously I am very happy to have taken this win. I got really lucky on the last day. Pioneers got really lucky on the last day just with those 2 starting pitchers. I kind of felt like Fenton was breathing down, the Pioneers' neck all week long. Portland did kind of outdo them in most categories. Sort of all of the top row in at-bats, hits, runs scored, singles, doubles, triples, home runs, RBIs, walks, intentional walks. All of those were led by Portland. Really, the only major hitting category that they didn't lead in was strikeouts, where they did strike out 3 more times than the Melonheads. And then had a little bit of a quality over quantity thing there. Fewer earned runs, 39 to 44. Fewer hits allowed, 71 to 77. Fewer walks allowed, 24 to 37. Although that did come across 6 fewer innings pitched in total. So, there is no question that Fenton will be just fine. If I had to diagnose their loss this week, obviously those two slow starts to end the week did not help anything out, but a bit of a slow week for the Bats. Obviously, Kyle Schwarber being out for a lot of the week really, really hurt. -3 on the week total for Schwarbombs there. And Yordan Alvarez with only 3 points on the week as well. Does look like he missed some time throughout the week. So, look, the Melonheads were missing their two key guys, this team is going to be just fine and just dandy. Overall, I'm feeling pretty good about where things are at in Portland. The offense does seem to be finally kind of coming together and doing what was expected. Corbin Carroll's come out of that little slump. Bo Bichette has been pretty nice since I traded for him. Jake Berger has been a great pickup. The re-additions of Francisco Lindor and Roman Anthony, probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks, should also help things out there. And that is our matchup minute. We'll move on to the standings, where we see a new team at the top. Arizona Asphalt lead the charge with a 7-2 record. The Soul Sovereigns also at 7-2, just behind them, but trailing in total points scored. The Fenton Melonheads hold the number 3 spot with a 6-3 record, followed by the Portland Pioneers, their opponent from this past week, at the number 4. Washington State winners above 500 now at 5-4 are in the 5th spot, with the North Pole Natty Bows just behind them in the 6th spot, and Southwest Kansas rounding out our over 500 group at 7th place, just outside of a playoff spot as of right now. The Arctic Real Survivors, one game below 500 at 4-5, are in 8th place. The Valley Gift Lords are in 9th, with Cuyahoga in 10th. The Joinville Friendly Capybaras are in 11th place with a 3-6 record, the same record as the St. Petersburg Tropopologists in 12th, and the Bronx Bandoleros in 13th. And finally, bringing up our rear, we do have the Sault Ste. Marie Locks in 14th place with their 1-8 record. Let's move on to bench blunders. Claims Corner, we'll talk about all of that stuff from this week. Blunders were relatively small. No big matchup deciders on this one. Small, I mean, in terms of impact. On the pitching side, they were actually kind of large, and we'll get to that in just a second. We'll start off with the bats. Adley Rutschman had 11 points for the North Pole on Monday. Colt Emerson had 13 for Washington State on Sunday, and Ernie Clement had 14 for the Real Survivors on Monday. For the Arms, it was almost all starting pitchers. So, of course, when it comes to the starting pitchers, we got to remember sometimes these people are sat, intentionally, so as to not go over start limits. But the thing I check is basically if you had somebody else that day going for a start that scored fewer points, we are going to call it a bench blunder. Whether or not it was tactically the correct decision or not, the numbers don't lie. So Jack Kahanowitz with 21 points was on Cuyahoga's bench on Wednesday. Zach Gallen with 26 points was on Cuyahoga's bench on Monday. And Andre Palante with 28 points was on the Valley's bench on Saturday. Let me take a quick... Cuyahoga won their matchup, so it did not obviously end up mattering there. But with 40 points separating the two of them, that could have been a much bigger blowout there. I think Serial's definitely feeling thankful for that win. Let's talk over the Claims Corner. Luke Rayleigh went for $11 over to the North Pole on Monday. Sean Newcomb went for $12 to Washington State. An $8 bid by Cuyahoga rejected. Scott Barlow for $12 also went to Washington State. Another bullpen reinforcement there. And Dustin May went for $28 to Sault Ste. Marie. A $1 bid rejected by the Valley Gift Lords. On Thursday, lefty Jose Ferrer went for $10 to the Cuyahoga Black Panthers. Cody Clemens also went for $10 to Cuyahoga. $2 bids rejected by both Joinville and Portland for the Son of the Rocket. Drew Anderson went for $20 to the Joinville Friendly Capybaras. And Trevor Rogers went for $10 to the Valley. Unfortunately, a $51 bid, which would have blown Al Martinez out of the water, was rejected for the Real Survivors due to an illegal roster, what it would have been. A handy note there, when you go to claim somebody, make sure that you're adding them to your bench, not to your starting lineup. If you add them to the starting pitcher slot, unfortunately, it can lead to this. It doesn't always, but if you've planned ahead, sometimes it does. So a quick thing to do, just as you go through that ad, make sure when you click where they're going, move them to the bench, just to make sure nothing like that happens. So obviously a tough break for Min there and the real survivors, having that big bid knocked out because of that, but he does go to the Valley on a $10 bid. Let's quickly talk over our transaction tracker. The Bronx Bandoleros sent Jackson Jobe and a 2028 second to Sault Ste. Marie in exchange for Sault Ste. Marie's 2028 first. Looks like, KJ's getting a hometown guy in Jackson Jobe, someone he can watch closely, someone we know he's got that, that big fastball and plus stuff, and is definitely a future piece, as I believe he is currently recovering from, I want to say, Tommy John, certainly a long-term injury. In a surprising trade, Sault Ste. Marie sent out their recent, young starting pitcher acquisition in Logan Henderson, sent them over to St. Petersburg in exchange for Jarren Duran, of course, and quickly flipped to Washington State and back, rubbing a little bit of that Mike magic on Duran. Washington State sent Kirby Yates over to Portland for a 2027 fourth. Bronx traded Eric Miller and their 2028 fourth over to Cuyahoga for the Bandoleros 2028 third round pick. The Valley Gift Lords traded Evan Carter to Sault Ste. Marie for $20 in fab. Sault Ste. Marie then sent Jung-Hoo Lee and Fenton's 2028 third over to Washington State for Spencer Miles and TJ Rumfield. Washington State then sent that 2028 third back to them in exchange for Brant Herter. So really you can look at it as Jung-Hoo Lee and Brant Herter in exchange for Spencer Miles and TJ Rumfield. Final trade of the week, Sault Ste. Marie sent Brandon Young over to the Arctic Real Survivors for Arctic's 2027 third round pick. Just a quick couple highlights. Obviously, look, we're going to talk over KJ and the locks. They are always involved here. I think that they are making a nice play at a buy low for Jarren Duran, who obviously has been off to a pretty rough start to the season, but we have seen in years past what an explosive player he can be, and with Logan Henderson being younger, and you never really know how guys are going to be operated in that Milwaukee bullpen, pardon me. It's an understandable risk to want to get off. On the other side, St. Petersburg is, able to kind of sell Jarren Duran, who they've had for a few years now, or for a couple of years, I should say, in exchange for Henderson, who is a young guy and fits that St. Petersburg mold. Good starting pitching, young starting pitching does the trick. And then the other one I did want to just quickly touch on is the Sault Ste. Marie trade that sent Jung-Hoo Lee over. A nice get for Washington State. Always nice to get a guy like Lee who has that center field eligibility. And Spencer Miles and TJ Rumfield are two younger guys. I will say they are more win now pieces than I would have expected the locks to be trading for. Rumfield obviously on this big hot streak, but not really a guy we'd expect to. And Spencer Miles who's kind of operating in that long reliever role. And depending on which way he goes, his value can kind of change. But Sault Ste. Marie can also flip those pieces or hold on to them. You never know. TJ Rumfield might just become one of those cores guys. Overall, I think a relatively balanced trade on both sides. If the only critique I would really have are just in terms of timelines. I do think that the value is quite balanced. Maybe even a little bit of a lean to Sault Ste. Marie in terms of total value. Just the kind of questions around the timeline there. But nothing too drastic and nothing too scary. Finally, we'll slide down to next week's notes. We'll start off with the Washington State winners, who are 5-4, taking on the Cuyahoga Black Panthers at 4-5. Cuyahoga will be looking to knock Washington State down to their level and bring things to that, total points scored tiebreaker. Don't forget, I know this is obviously different from last season, so I'm saying it a bunch on the podcast to remind myself too. Obviously, last year, head-to-head matchup was our first tiebreaker, so those head-to-heads really, really mattered. With not being able to play everybody in, play everybody twice, we changed the tiebreaker to just total points scored. So, obviously, racking up those points, even in big wins and big losses are important. The Seoul Sovereigns at 7-2 will be taking on the Portland Pioneers at 6-3. The Sovereigns riding a 4-game win streak and Portland riding a 3-game win streak. So one of in 10 or I is leaving this week unhappy, as if we weren't unhappy enough already as Red Sox fans. The Arctic Real Survivors are taking on the Joinville Friendly Capybaras. Arctic at 4-5 and the Capybaras at 3-6. The Arizona Asphalt at 7-2 take on the 4-5 Valley Gift Lords. The Bronx Bandoleros, with their 3-6 record, welcome the Sault Ste. Marie Locks with their 1-8 record. The Fenton Melonheads welcome the Southwest Kansas Rabid Coyotes. Fenton sitting at 6-3 and Southwest sitting at 5-4. And our final matchup of the week, the St. Petersburg Tropologists at 3-6 will be facing off against the North Pole Natty Bows at 5-4. Something in me just tingles a little bit about that matchup. I think it could be a lot of fun. I did kind of want to put Portland versus Seoul, obviously the 1 and the 4 going up against each other, those big win streaks, but come on, Zang, I can't be going out here putting my own team as the headlining matchup 2 weeks in a row. So I'm just going to highlight that St. Pete North Pole one. I think it could be interesting, and I've given the spiel, the spiel. But it'll be interesting, obviously, given what I believe about St. Pete and what we know about the North Pole. So those are our matchups for the next week. Week 10, we are already into double digits. Life is good. We are all happy to be here. And I think that's about all for now. I will see you this time next week. Going to be trying out a little bit of a different format for the recaps. So I'm excited next week to hear sort of your thoughts on that. I tried it out just a little bit to end this week, and it'll be in full swing for next episode. So, always trying to kind of make sure I can make this podcast as much fun as possible for all of you. And of course, as always, if you ever have any suggestions or anything you want to hear more or less of, let me know. I do this for me because it's fun, but I really do it for all of you because it does bring so much extra joy and that extra element into our league. So please let me know and enjoy your week, everyone. May the fantasy gods be with you, and have a good one.
Do you know what that makes you, Larry?
Lollygaggers.
Lolly.